He is unstoppable, unless he is taking on too many challenges at once. That is what some fans are muttering right now, as David Fincher, the legendary creator of dark, stylish dramas, plots a sweeping expansion of major franchises on Netflix. Does this mean an extraordinary renaissance for one of Hollywood's boldest auteurs? Or could it be an outright gamble that jeopardizes his signature brand of meticulous, shadowy storytelling? Today, we are digging into the rumors, hopes, and fears swirling around Fincher's involvement with an American version of the Korean phenomenon Squid Game, and a follow-up to Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, both courtesy of Netflix's seemingly limitless budget and appetite for hit content. These are not minor projects. We are talking about a reimagining of the global juggernaut Squid Game, which captured imaginations within weeks of its release, and a sequel to one of Tarantino's most celebrated films. In short, we are about to examine how Fincher has unexpectedly become the newest steward of two high-profile properties that originally embodied their creators' unique sensibilities. Could these expansions deliver the same cinematic magic we have come to expect from Fincher's works? Or will they fizzle into uninspired rehashes? In this deep dive, we will uncover how Netflix's high-risk, high-reward strategy might change the face of Fincher's career forever. Along the way, we will also discover how Brad Pitt reprises his role as Cliff Booth, how the new Squid Game might shift away from Hwang Dong-hyuk's original vision, and when or if we can still hope for more Mindhunter. Sound intriguing? It certainly should, because the stakes could not be higher. David Fincher built his reputation on meticulously crafted films that snake through the darkest corridors of human nature. From C7N's shockingly macabre exploration of sin to Zodiac's sprawling cat-and-mouse pursuit of an infamous serial killer, Fincher's name has become almost synonymous with tone, tension, and unparalleled cinematic precision. His foray into Netflix began modestly enough with the groundbreaking House of Cards, where he established the show's moody, high-contrast aesthetic and directed its first 2 episodes. Then came Mindhunter, a gripping detective drama about the nascent days of criminal profiling, which fused Fincher's obsession with procedural detail and Netflix's bravado for edgy, original content. Viewers marveled at how Mindhunter felt every bit like a 2-hour Fincher film, stretched into 10 episodes, yet never losing narrative momentum. But while Mindhunter enthralled critics and found a loyal following, it apparently lacked the blockbuster viewership that Netflix demands. Now, the tables have turned. Instead of devoting money and time to another deeply personal detective saga, Netflix has enticed Fincher with bigger brand expansions. Among them is a rumored Chinatown prequel to be written by Robert Towne, the legendary screenwriter behind the original film's labyrinthine script. Though that is intriguing, it is overshadowed by talk of 2 mega projects that arguably carry even more risk. First is a planned sequel to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, with Brad Pitt reviving his role as Cliff Booth from Tarantino's 2019 film. Instead of Tarantino behind the camera, we will see Fincher interpreting a script that Tarantino reportedly wrote. It is already the subject of fervent debate among cinephiles who question if the flamboyant, comedic rhythms of Tarantino can blend seamlessly with Fincher's dark meticulousness. The second project is even more polarizing: Squid Game, America. With the original Korean series still fresh in people's minds, some question why Netflix needs an American reimagining at all. After all, Squid Game from creator Hwang Dong-hyuk delivered both shock value and searing social commentary that felt uniquely Korean. Can Fincher replicate or even reinvent that sense of cultural specificity? Or will this new version come off as a generic retread wearing the Squid Game name? The question reveals a deeper concern. In an era of near-infinite reboots, can Fincher maintain the authenticity that made his best work so unforgettable? Fincher has always excelled at dissecting morally ambivalent characters, plunging into their psychological undercurrents with near-forensic scrutiny. This skill could lend itself beautifully to a cutthroat survival drama like Squid Game, though fans worry Netflix's impulse toward grand spectacle might overshadow the socio-political bite that made the original series so compelling. Meanwhile, The Adventures of Cliff Booth, a working title, evidently, is sure to intrigue fans of Tarantino's distinctive cinematic universe. Yet can we have a legitimate sequel to an iconic Tarantino film without Tarantino, the same man who was so protective of the tone and style in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? If you are also asking those questions, you are not alone. enthusiasts cannot help but wonder if the creative friction between Tarantino's script and Fincher's direction will produce a masterpiece or an identity crisis. Whichever outcome arises, it almost certainly will not be bland. And the stakes go beyond creative synergy. Netflix has invested a great deal in Fincher, from Mindhunter to Mank, with the streaming giant seeking to diversify into more prestige auteurs. Fincher's proven track record, including The Social Network, Gone Girl, and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, suggests that major expansions might be successful, especially with Netflix's marketing might behind him. But ironically, it is Mindhunter, the beloved deep dive into the psyches of serial killers and the FBI's attempts to decipher them, that fans want more than anything. The show concluded its second season on a note that left so many storylines ripe for further exploration, only for Netflix to declare it too expensive given its viewership metrics. Then, the platform swiftly greenlit an American Squid Game, an arguably bigger gamble in pursuit of mainstream shock value. Does that indicate Netflix has more faith in brand expansions than in wholly original adult drama? Before we unravel how Mindhunter seems to have lost out to these huge franchises, let us remember that Fincher is not a director who shies away from creative challenges. He took on a remake of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, originally a Swedish film adaptation, and made it distinctly his own, injecting an even darker sense of dread that many considered a perfect match for his style. Thus, one could argue that reimagining Squid Game might not be so strange after all. The question is how much freedom he will have to revise the premise, the aesthetics, and the tone. Hwang Dong-hyuk's version enthralled viewers with lethal children's games in austere playgrounds, an ingenious concept that balanced surreal visuals with biting capitalist allegory. For Fincher to replicate that dynamic or reshape it into something similarly resonant is no small feat. On the other side of the coin, The Adventures of Cliff Booth raises eyebrows because Tarantino's voice is so unmistakable. One viewer can almost imagine the snap of dialogue, the needle drops of iconic songs, and the nostalgic glow of old-school Hollywood. Fincher's approach tends to strip away illusion, focusing on the psychological machinery beneath the surface. So, if you have ever wondered how Cliff Booth might look under a more unforgiving lens, an ex-stuntman who may or may not have a troubling past, Fincher's direction might magnify that darkness. Yet the comedic tone and unpredictable tangents of Tarantino might vanish, replaced by Fincher's methodical gaze. Could that be cinematic gold, or does it risk divorcing the character from what made him so beloved? Now, if you are enjoying these twists and speculations, feel free to tap that wonderful like button if you want more deep dives into the unexpected corners of Hollywood's biggest franchises. We appreciate every bit of support and enthusiasm, especially when it comes at these pivotal moments in cinematic evolution. After all, the more we delve, the more we discover how intricately Netflix is weaving Fincher's future. Of course, we must not ignore other rumored projects that swirl around Fincher's Netflix deal. A Chinatown prequel, supposedly with Robert Towne returning as screenwriter, entices classic film lovers who have always craved more from that neo-noir realm. There is also talk of Strangers, allegedly a modern reworking of the 1951 Alfred Hitchcock classic Strangers on a Train. And on top of that, fans wonder about the rumored sequel to The Social Network that Aaron Sorkin may write. Where does that leave precious resources like time, creative energy, and Netflix's willingness to keep funneling budget into Fincher's visions? Some cynics say it is too good to be true, that eventually something has to give, be postponed, or vanish altogether. Others claim Netflix intends to tie everything together in a marketing spree that cements their brand as the go-to platform for top-shelf, auteur-driven content. One cannot discuss Fincher's love-hate relationship with big franchises without mentioning his complicated history in Hollywood. This is the filmmaker who once famously battled studios during the making of Alien 3, an experience so bitter he rarely references that entry in his otherwise remarkable filmography. Yet modern streaming services tend to grant more creative latitude, and Fincher has spoken warmly about Netflix's support. Even Mank, an intricate black-and-white homage to old Hollywood, found a home on Netflix despite its niche appeal. One wonders if the streamer is now expecting payback in the form of wide audience, marquee expansions that can generate buzz and subscribers, such as the ready-made brand recognition carried by Squid Game and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Meanwhile, Mindhunter fans cannot help feeling disappointed. It is not every day that a show so deeply resonates with crime drama aficionados. weaving real-life serial killer interviews with fictionalized but psychologically credible arcs for the lead agents. Rumors once circulated that Mindhunter's Season 3 would delve more deeply into Hollywood, exploring how law enforcement might consult on film sets, or how certain crimes might influence show business. The irony is almost painful. It hints that Fincher had a Hollywood story to tell within Mindhunter, only for him to abandon the series to do an actual Hollywood spin-off with Cliff Booth. Some might call that poetic justice. Others lament that Netflix simply did not see the streaming numbers they wanted, so they enticed Fincher with bigger, surefire hits. It is also worth noting the success of Love, Death for Robots, an anthology series Fincher helped produce. While the show has proven that Netflix is open to more experimental content, even letting Fincher direct an animated music video in one instance, the real question is whether the streaming giant prioritizes big brand expansions over smaller, original narratives. If that is the case, we might witness Fincher devoting the next few years to feeding expansions like Squid Game, America, The Adventures of Cliff Booth, and maybe even that Chinatown prequel, with each project diminishing the likelihood of Mindhunter's return. That might devastate viewers who championed Mindhunter as the best representation of Fincher's cinematic approach stretched into episodic form. Yet, who can deny the sheer excitement of watching Fincher adapt Tarantino's writing? For all the swirling doubts, it could be a once-in-a-lifetime collaboration. Two titans with clashing visions that might somehow fuse into something absolutely riveting. Equally, one could argue that an American version of Squid Game directed by Fincher could delve into a different cultural context, exploring economic despair or class divides in a distinctly Western setting. Instead of a carbon copy, perhaps it becomes a fresh vantage on the same grim premise. If you too are sensing that electric possibility, you might want to subscribe to our channel so you never miss updates on these developments, because they are shaping up to be some of Hollywood's boldest experiments in recent memory. Will Fincher's next projects overshadow or upend the legacy he has painstakingly built? In an era when even Christopher Nolan or Martin Scorsese choose their projects carefully to preserve their creative identities, Fincher has jumped on multiple trains at once. The fear is that some of these expansions, Squid Game, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Chinatown, have such distinct creative stamps from their original masters that Fincher might appear more like a hired gun than an auteur. And yet, Fincher has always proven adept at making pre-existing tales into his own. Furthermore, Tarantino apparently wrote the Cliff Booth script with Fincher in mind for reasons that remain a bit mysterious. If Tarantino himself trusts Fincher's sensibilities, might we be in for an unconventional but seamless passing of the torch? When it comes to the future of cinematic storytelling, streaming platforms like Netflix wield enormous influence. They can bankroll projects that studios might find too risky, like Mank, or they can commission massive expansions of proven hits, like Squid Game. The question is whether they will maintain a balance between the brand building and the more nuanced, original series that Fincher once pioneered with Mindhunter. After all, if Netflix is truly concerned about production costs, you would think a new iteration of Squid Game, complete with elaborate sets and special effects, would cost a fortune. Then again, maybe the potential for global hype is so huge that the cost feels justified. The same goes for a Tarantino-adjacent film. Even if it demands an all-star cast and meticulous period recreation, the allure of seeing a revered Fincher adaptation will likely send Netflix's marketing campaigns into overdrive. One cannot help but wonder, at what point does the dream become too good to be true? The fact that we are even discussing 4 or 5 giant Fincher projects in short succession, Chinatown, The Adventures of Cliff Booth, Squid Game, America, Strangers, maybe The Social Network 2, feels almost surreal. Has Netflix become the genie that grants every cinematic wish? Or will we learn that not all of these projects can realistically pass through development, leaving fans with heartbreak as some vanish into development hell? The swirling rumors highlight a pattern, Netflix announcing or hinting at major expansions to generate excitement, then quietly shelving certain ideas if they fail to pan out. Fincher's fans, who have waited patiently for Mindhunter Season 3, have every right to be skeptical. Still, as we near the finale of today's deep dive, let us remember that Fincher remains one of the most consistent directors of the modern era. From his stylized flights through digital darkness to his razor-sharp explorations of the human psyche, Fincher's oeuvre reveals a director who rarely phoned it in. If he and Netflix have forged a new creative alliance, perhaps we will see him transform Squid Game, America into an audacious commentary on Western capitalism, or reinterpret Tarantino's comedic Cliff Booth saga through a brutal, satirical lens. Strangers could be an homage to Hitchcock with a distinctly Fincher twist, and the Chinatown prequel might be a labyrinthine marvel if he can replicate the original's tension. On the other hand, if these expansions falter, it might be the first time in Fincher's career that his ambition collided with external demands in a way that overshadowed his artistry. The possibility is enthralling because so much rests on the intangible alchemy between script, direction, cast, and audience reception. Perhaps that precariousness is exactly what draws Fincher to these risky ventures. He has stated multiple times he enjoys living on the edge of what a storyteller can accomplish. One can only hope Netflix's metrics-based approach to success will not stifle the creative latitude that Fincher craves. So, there you have it, a complex tapestry of big brand expansions, original spin-offs, and uncertain renewals swirling around David Fincher's future at Netflix. Will the adventures of Cliff Booth deliver the Tarantino-infused sequel fans never realized they needed? Could Squid Game America surpass its predecessor in thematic power and arresting visuals, or will it merely turn heads for a few fleeting weeks? Whichever direction it all goes, these projects prove that Fincher remains a visionary risk-taker who is unafraid to experiment with the unlikeliest of collaborations. And we, the ever-curious audience, get a front-row seat to watch how this bold new chapter unfolds.